What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Israel Adesanya frustrated with Dana White for erasing history. Recently, the UFC opted to edit comments made by Israel Adesanya while filming the UFC 305 countdown show before publishing them in a video to promote this weekend's pay-per-view. While speaking on camera, Adesanya referenced himself, Francis Ngannou, and Kamaru Usman, a group who all simultaneously held titles in the UFC, collectively known as the Three African Kings. During editing, the UFC Countdown producers opted to edit the clip of Adesanya, removing the segment where he name drops Francis Ngannou. The situation was quick to go viral, with a side-by-side video showing Adesanya's full comments and the edited version shown on the UFC 305 countdown episode, sparking quite a bit of criticism from the MMA community directed at the UFC.
There's always tension whenever you fight anyone. This is a fight at the end of the day. We're not playing chess, we're fighting. So there's always gonna be tension there. But then him discrediting me, Kamaru Usman, he came in the UFC, I knew who he was a little bit, but I didn't go, oh, what the this fake dude coming in. I just said, cool, there's another African in the UFC. That ticked me off a little bit, so that's what started this. But again, I'll finish it. And also again, he tried to discredit the Three Kings and say that he's the real true African champion. And I was just like, it's a weird mindset, bro. Like, he came in the UFC, I knew who he was a little bit, but I didn't go, oh, what the this fake dude coming in. I just said, cool, there's another African in the UFC. But then him discrediting me, Francis Ngannou, Kamaru Usman, that ticked me off a little bit. So that's what started this. But again, I'll finish it.
On Wednesday, while speaking to media members, Adesanya called out the UFC for attempting to erase Ngannou from UFC history in a video captured by ESPN.
Well, and also, you can never erase Francis' history from the UFC. I'll say that. It's part of history. We need to fix this. I don't like that. I don't like the fact we're trying to just cut out a really important part of history. It's silly. It's really silly. But we'll fix that. That's for later on. We'll fix that.
The MMA community was quick to react to Adesanya's comments, with one fan writing, "If I annoyed my employer, I'd be erased from the company too." Another praised Adesanya, writing, "Respect for speaking up for his friend." Another agreed, adding, "Speaking absolute facts here. Just because Dana is sour about how Francis left doesn't mean you can just completely erase him from UFC history." With Adesanya vowing to fix the situation later on, the MMA community will have to wait and see what the last stylebender has planned. Next up, let's take a look at Islam Makhachev receives warning from fighter. After successfully defending the lightweight title against Alexander Volkanovski twice, and most recently against Dustin Poirier, Islam Makhachev is one win away from surpassing the record for most successful title defenses at 155 pounds. While Makhachev's reign has so far been an impressive one, with back-to-back finishes in his two most recent fights, Ricky Glenn, who previously shared a training room with Makhachev back in 2016 during Fight Week, is predicting that sooner or later, the champion could wind up dealing with the consequences of excessive weight cutting. During a recent interview with MMA News ahead of his fight with Kenan Song this weekend, Glenn spoke about the champ's brutal weight cuts.
And he's just on a whole nother level. And he cuts a lot of weight. I'm surprised he hasn't moved up. But he makes the weight somehow and can recover. You know, I'd be worried eventually, you know, if he can't recover good enough, someone's going to TKO or knock him out, I think. But with cutting that much weight, you know, it's impressive how much he cuts and, you know, fills back up. And
as Makhachev recently revealed, he's currently dealing with a hand injury that could keep him on the sidelines until next year, opening the door to a possible interim lightweight title fight between Arman Tsarukyan and another top contender while the champion recovers. Next up, let's take a look at Dana White asked about UFC fighter pay. One of the hottest and most controversial topics in all of MMA is fighter pay. While players in the NBA wind up getting over 54% of total revenue generated by the league, and players in the NFL get 46% of the revenue generated by the league, the UFC pays its fighters just 18.6% of total revenue according to unsealed court documents. Given that, many feel as though the UFC needs to pay its fighters more appropriately and share a larger percent of its revenue. Dana White, on the other hand, feels as though fighters make plenty of money. During a recent appearance on the Full Send podcast, White was asked what would make him raise fighter pay.
Fighter pay has gone up every year since 2001. You know, I don't talk about fighter pay because I know exactly what fighters are being paid.
As one of the podcast co-hosts pointed out, the UFC allows fighters to secure their own business deals outside of the octagon, unlike other pro sports organizations.
Gregor is now an owner in Bare Knuckle.
Yeah.
Conor's still under contract here. Anything you want to do outside the UFC, you can do.
Despite White's comments, as attorney Eric McGracken pointed out last year, thanks to a piece of investigative reporting from John Nash, the UFC's new contracts appear to allow the promotion to take a piece of any business venture started by a fighter on the roster. White also notably spoke about a potential fight between Alex Pereira and Jake Paul, questioning whether a commission would even sanction the fight while dismissing Paul as a pay-per-view draw.
That's going to happen. That's just not going to happen.
The commission would even let that fight happen.
That's how
And
bad
you're
it would
talking
be.
boxing or UFC?
Boxing. He's
He'd
talking
kick
about
his
boxing.
head to
Kill him.
another planet. It would be. Alex is a superstar right now. So Jake calls him out, and Jake gets press.
Smart.
Jake says that I'm trying to assassinate him, and I said I'm gonna. It's all lies. It's not true. He sells
Right now,
400 times the pay-per-view.
Okay, perfect.
The Jake Paul fight that just happened didn't sell any pay-per-views.
With the fight between Pereira and Paul out of the question, it'll be interesting to see if Paul continues to pursue a fight with Mike Tyson. Next, let's take a look at Dricus du Plessis receives warning before UFC 305. Leading up to their UFC 305 fight this weekend, Dricus du Plessis suggested that Israel Adesanya should consider withdrawing from their scheduled bout. As DDP explained, he's feeling incredibly dangerous, and if the roles were reversed and he was in Adesanya's shoes, he would consider withdrawing. This week, on an episode of Good Guy Bad Guy with Daniel Cormier, Chael Sonnen flipped the script, offering a word of warning to du Plessis ahead of Saturday's middleweight title fight.
Well, it's wildly important that our viewers understand what these guys are fighting for. Like, it's not to sell a pay-per-view that we discuss this topic. When you know what a guy's motivation is, Israel Adesanya has done his finest work when it's personal. As a matter of fact, the worst performance he's put forward is against Sean Strickland, and the only thing that was missing was personal feud. He didn't have a problem with Sean when that fight happened. He wasn't really looking at Sean. Sean was ranked number 6. They hadn't gone at the top 5 for a title contender in a while. It's a last-minute replacement. Izzy was a 6-1 favorite. When that fight was over,
While Adesanya showed by defeating Alex Pereira that he's at his best when things are personal and the stakes are high, things between the last stylebender and Sean Strickland got incredibly personal leading up to their fight as well. Strickland notably cracked jokes about questionable videos Adesanya had previously posted with his dog, leading to some heated pre-fight exchanges between the two. Okay, now let's take a look at Oscar De La Hoya goes off on Dana White. There's certainly no love lost between Dana White and Oscar De La Hoya. While the pair have stated in the past that they're over their long-standing feud, the beef between the two promoters remains. Recently, during an appearance on Shannon Sharp's Club Shay Shay podcast, De La Hoya was asked about White and their relationship. As De La Hoya explained, while they previously had a good relationship, once he began to entertain the idea of promoting MMA fights, he felt as though White wanted to bury him. On Club Shay Shay, De La Hoya then ripped White, referencing his infamous altercation with his wife and the previous comments White's mom made about her son.
Literally, I don't even think about it. We're in different sports. He does his thing, I do my thing. Just because I wanted to start a little competition, he gets all, let me scream louder. I mean, when a guy slaps his wife in public, when his mom writes a book about him saying that he's a douche, his own mom, that's all I have to say. I don't have to say anything more. I don't know why it started. I mean, the promotional thing, but we were actually pretty cool. But anyway, it's all good.
So far, no response yet from White. However, with the UFC boss expected to speak to media members on Saturday night after the upcoming UFC 305 card, it wouldn't be surprising to hear White asked about the latest comments from Oscar De La Hoya. Up next, let's take a look at Anthony Smith shuts down UFC rumor. Earlier this month, reports emerged indicating that Anthony Smith and Dominic Reyes would throw down at the UFC 310 card on December 7th in a light heavyweight scrap. While the booking caught the attention of many members of the MMA community, Smith recently set the record straight during an appearance on Sirius XM's Fight Nation, explaining that he never received a contract for that fight. After receiving a call about the potential scrap and saying that he would prefer to throw down with Reyes in December, it was a matter of hours before news of a Smith-Reyes fight began to circulate the MMA community, leaving Lionheart confused.
I agreed. And you know how it is. Sometimes it takes a while to get the contracts. But they called with one name, and I said, yeah, whatever. I'll fight that guy. And it was like that day, that name. Well, yeah, whatever. I'll do that. Then they came back a couple days later, actually, how about Reyes? With no date, nothing. I said, yeah, I'll fight Reyes. So then they were like, well, how about this day or this day? So I said, I would rather it be, I just didn't want to fight in November. It was November and another date. I don't want to fight in November. So they were like, all right, cool, the other one. And that was the last I've heard.
Given that it sounds like Smith agreed to fight Reyes in December, a fight between these two could still wind up getting finalized for the UFC 310 card on December 7th, despite the fact that no contracts have been signed just yet. Okay, now let's take a look at Dan Hooker trashes UFC lightweight fighters in interview. Throughout his career, Dan Hooker has repeatedly proven himself to be one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC, earning a slew of post-fight bonuses while leaving everything in the octagon each and every fight, win or lose. Leading up to his UFC 305 clash with Mateusz Gamrot this weekend, Hooker took aim at the top lightweights on the roster, such as Islam Makhachev, Arman Tsarukyan, and Mateusz Gamrot, calling them out for their fighting styles despite their success with dominant grappling. During a sit-down interview with the Freestyle Bender channel, Hooker explained his stance.
Because obviously being a sort of exciting fighter and wanting to go out there and perform and put on a show and put on an incredible fight for the fans is you need the other guy to oblige. You need the other guy to want to do that as well. So I feel like the top echelon of the lightweight division now with Islam and Arman and Gamrot is the guys that have just stifled the division.
As Hooker went on to explain, because the division's best has been able to stifle exciting fighters with grappling, he believes that the 155-pound division is in a quote-unquote weird place. Khamzat Chimaev runs into Henry Cejudo and goes off. Henry Cejudo detailed a run-in he had recently with Khamzat on his Pound for Pound podcast, where he claims that Khamzat called him a rat piece of ish while waiting in line for tickets. Here's what Henry had to say.
I was here, I was at the ticket line, and then he sees me, he's like, Henry Cejudo, you're a rat piece of and then I'm just like, and I kind of had a feeling this dude kind of had it, because he's blocking from a lot of the social media stuff. Oh. And I'm just like, why am I a piece of and he just said, I'm just a piece of like, this is probably like 50 feet away, like from each other. He's like with his Dagestani.
Was he by himself?
No, he was with like 6 dudes, and it was just me outside with freaking Captain Eric with his sparkly shirts and pants and shit. So anyways, I just left.
Dana White gets roasted in a new interview. Dana appeared on a recent episode of the Full Send podcast where he was talking about Power Slap, when Bob Menery began roasting Power Slap and Dana for thinking that it will be bigger than the UFC. Here's what Bob had to say.
And I said this before, and I'm going to say it again right now. This will be bigger than the UFC.
No chance. That's
I
how
said
long?
The UFC would be bigger than boxing. No chance.
How can you have something as an average person that turns on the TV and I watch Power Slap? I'll tell you what I do. Okay, I watch match 1 and it's the same. I watch match 2, it's the same. I watch match 3, it's the same. And I watch 4, it's the same. Somebody gets slapped in the face and they're done. That's it.
Tell me what's the same about each match you watch.
Somebody raises their right hand, they then make direct contact with somebody's face, and then somebody either falls or they don't. That's it.
So what happens when you watch a fight?
You can take somebody down, you can cut somebody's elbow open.
Let's say it's a boxing match. Boxing, which has been popular for over 100 years.
Because,
what's different?
I mean, the athletes are obviously, I think, different.
They're throwing the same combinations.
I'm just saying I could help you.
You can't help yourself.
Top comments. MMA media needs to stop giving McGregor coverage until he fights again. I'm a fan, and I'm sick of hearing about him. Chandler saying the sport will move on without Conor is hilarious, as he waited for him the last 2 years. People who say DDP is on steroids based on his physique never been to a gym in their entire life. As a South African and a DDP fan, Strickland absolutely deserves that rematch. They should have given him the rematch immediately.